Everything's huge at the moment.
Like unrecognizable from who we were a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Lots of interchanges, shifts. And I think I don't know, I've had massive shifts with time as well.
Mm-hmm. What do you know about like cellular changes, like the cellular changes that are going on in our bodies as we...
Do you mean like actual...
Physical.
Physiological? Or...
Like vibrational?
Or upgrades, that sort of thing. Because I think our cells, don't they... I don't know, don't quote me on this because I don't know, but they do, what do you call it, go through a life cycle? I don't know what the life cycle is, but they do. So there's a death and rebirth of this at a cellular level all the time, which is quite profound because everything is sort of going through cycles and, in eras of time, epochs and stuff. And we're in a massive one right now on a collective consciousness and global and earthly human realm.
It's huge.
Yeah. But
How do you feel about being here for that?
I know a lot of the spiritual gurus, the truth is out there. They say that if you're here at this time, then you chose, that was part of your soul contract or soul journey. So you're a part of helping to usher in, however you want to call it, like the new earth that's birthing or the new consciousness or the new version of humanity, whatever. Yeah. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I feel like I'm obviously here. And the more I feel into it, the more I tune into it, I know that I'm meant to be here and meant to contribute in some way, however large or small. Part
of it's a choice though, isn't it? Like I choose to think that I'm meant to be here and I chose to be here, because to choose to be accidentally here doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, because that's an oxymoronic thing.
Well, you know what I mean? It's like we could just be like, well, it's this whole, like for me, realizing in recent years that I'd been a bystander of my life, thinking that life occurred. And now I'm like, holy shit, I create it.
Yeah,
I am.
That's like huge.
And it is huge. The bystander, right?
Because a bystander,
and things happen, and then you're the victim because you're like, oh, this happened. This has happened to me, and this has happened to me. It's like, no, I created, or I chose these lessons, or
well, we were talking, before we jumped in the studio, about the three things, the thoughts. What was it?
Thoughts, the words, and the actions.
Yeah.
So think it, speak it, do it.
Yeah. Think it, speak it, do it. So, you create your reality first by your thoughts, by what you think. So being aware of what you think. And then, and the action. And then how, and where are those thoughts coming from? Like who's creating those thoughts? So, when you figure that out, then you realize that you're not just a bystander, you're creating it. Yeah. It's powerful.
Speaking of creating it, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Created podcast with Rob and Steve from Reality Hub, and our guest today in studio, Penny Claridge, who is a longtime friend of ours and a seeker of truth on a journey that seems unstoppable, and an important influence in my life personally, a great friend, and I'm so pleased you could make it into the studio tonight. I promise to try not to delete this episode. We tried once before, and as fate would have it, it was just not meant to be. But here we are. Yeah.
Good to be here.
So you're getting around the country a bit at the moment, hey?
I have a caravan now. Yeah. So me and my dog travel quite a lot. And we just show up places. And I just have learned the art of following my feels on where I'm meant to go, and then just watching the magic unfold.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty life-changing. I've learned that now I'm finding my free spirit self.
Oh, that's amazing. And you just started your own podcast too, haven't you?
I've just joined Voice Media, so voicemedia.nz, and I've created a channel on there called Pendulum.
I get it.
Yeah. Because, and it says it on there, but I had I was called a lot of names because of my name, Penny. And so I thought I would use that play on words. And pendulum is about the pendulum swinging back to the truth. in all things and in the media. So yeah, on that channel I can have articles, podcasts and videos. Haven't got any podcasts yet, but I'm going to pop some of these ones up here, I think.
Well, to give some context to why we might have Penny on, because we have lots of friends, but they don't necessarily just want to turn up and sit and talk with us on our podcast. You're creating content in lots of different ways, and I think you've got a great insight into the things that are going on in the world at the moment. So for people listening to the first time and hearing from Penny, wondering how they can find you for the future, I mean, they should go to those podcast locations to find Pendulum at Voice Media.
Yes, it's just a website, not a podcast, sorry. voicemedia.nz.
Sorry, yeah, right. But you're putting content up there anyway.
Yeah.
And for people who are perhaps on the same path as I guess our listeners are, who look at the world objectively, what's real, especially, I think, Rob, when we started our podcast prior to the pandemic, and then this whole unreal event took place. It couldn't have been better timed, could it? And
well, we scripted it that way, didn't we?
Well,
we intuitively felt
you knew what was coming.
That we were talking before about finding our voice.
Yeah.
And with Reality Hub as well. Yeah. Expressing and finding our voice and sharing that voice with like-minded souls. But yeah, under the guise, under the umbrella of reality and how reality is shifting and moving, and how where we are finding where humanity is at this stage of our evolutionary process.
Yeah.
So, but sorry, I kind of interrupted where you were going with that. Well, but yeah, you're right. This massive global event.
Yeah.
Planned event.
Well, the segue for what was relevant there for Penny with that massive global planned event is that it's very much affected your life, hasn't it? Where are you at with a journey of where you're at now versus where you were a couple of years ago?
I'm going to have to think of the short version of how to answer that.
Yeah.
Well, we've actually got quite a bit of time.
Yeah. So when people talk about awakenings, and some people were always awake versus having a spontaneous combustion.
I envy the spontaneous combustion people. They just go boom, and then they're red pilled, and that's it.
Oh, that's nice.
It's overrated at the time, because I thought, well, yeah. So I look back and I was having an awakening for the preceding few years, and that really came about through questioning. I think it always starts, I call it everyone's entry point into the truth. So for me, my entry point into the truth came about nutritional guidelines and diet back, quite a while ago, as someone who'd always battled with my weight. And then coming across ways of living that were opposite to the nutritional guidelines. You know, the healthy food pyramid? Yeah. So I tried doing that and it really didn't work for me. So when I started to research and try stuff out that was the opposite of that, like, eating fat will make you fat, which is what I'd always thought. So everything I'd eaten was like low fat, but I was fat. And I was like, it doesn't make sense.
That's such a great reality to smash, eh? That one.
It totally is. And then and actually getting over my own psychological damage that had been done of actually thinking that every time I ate fat, I was going to get fat. And dealing with the emotional connection with food and all that stuff. And then I trialed keto as a way of living, which totally didn't make sense to me because it was eating fat and protein and not carbs. And it worked for me, and I became my own experiment. So there was lots of things I learned there. So partly the government was lying on purpose, because meanwhile the hospitals were filling up with people with comorbidities, with chronic illnesses that were created through lifestyle. So the wheels started to fall off my trust in the government then. And then also unpacking your own psychological conditioning and the emotional connection to things. So really having to face yourself as not the victim, but as like, what is this that I can unpack and think about this differently that will change my life? How do I not be the victim in this, and how do I not blame other people? So then I went through a marriage breakup, and then I was telling myself all these stories, the thoughts. So the stories of I'm unlovable, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, I'm never going to blah, 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 blah.
What was this?
2020?
Yeah, I was just trying to get a time frame, but you talk about all those self-limiting beliefs and the stories. Was that something that came up recently during the marriage breakup, or was that something that had sort of been throughout your life, just as a sort of a...
Yeah, so the food stuff that had been throughout my whole life, and then I had realised that I'm really the only person that can change my mindset about it. So for me, it was about acknowledging the emotional connection with food as a starting point, and then going, wow, you know, it's not about hunger, it's not about any of that, it's about this emotional connection with food. And I've got to have an awareness of it first, and then decide. And
then you gained an awareness of your thoughts and your belief system, and as you say, the story and the narrative that you were telling yourself, which would obviously reinforce the negative and the emotional impact of that. Yeah,
so like emotional connection with food for me was food's a reward. Food is a comfort. You know, all those things, and going, wow, it's just food, you know, what if I just went for a walk instead? So realising that you have the power to change your own outcomes. So I went through that, and then I went through a marriage breakup where I was telling myself all these stories, and then I was like, what if I told myself some different stories? You know,
I'm really keen to hear some of those stories that you tell yourself, not because I want you to have to dig through old shit.
Yeah.
And especially because I know you've actually processed it all, but there might be something in there that people are telling themselves that they recognize and go, oh, you're someone else as well, not just me.
Yeah. So one of them was, because I've been married twice, is, you know, I've failed twice. No one's ever going to love me, right? And I had someone important tell me that, wow, you failed twice. You know, no one's ever going to love you. And I was like, one day I was like,
really?
No. We were having this conversation. And
some asshole told you that you'd failed twice? What a cunt.
Yeah.
I'm sure you love them deeply. I'm sorry.
Do you know, it was this simple, like realising how powerful your thoughts are. I was driving along one day and I thought, what if I told myself I'd tried twice?
Yeah. Well, how many girlfriends and boyfriends do we have before we get married? And do we say that's all failure?
Can I just say something? I was having this conversation with you on the drive in the car yesterday. Was it yesterday?
What
did
we say?
Well,
I forget.
I was relating a story with a friend who was saying, "Yeah, I'm a failure," and I said to him, basically, can you reframe the word failure? Because failure is has so many connotations to that word. But in essence, nothing is a failure or success. It's just an experience. We just add that meaning to it. So what you're doing is absolutely correct. Can I reframe that? You know, and I said,
yeah, that's right.
You know, you didn't fail at a relationship. You didn't fail at a job. You had the courage, you had the bravery to go into a relationship, to learn, to grow. And then you've changed the energy and the dynamic around it. So failure is just so final. But nothing is final. Nothing is
self-judgment too, you know?
The idea is so old-fashioned too, that, you know, that if you've ended a relationship, that it's somehow failure. It's such an old-fashioned idea.
It's an old paradigm. It's an old...
Yeah. And it's like maybe at a certain point in time there was an element to how that was perhaps, even though I don't know that I could ever agree with it, perhaps more true than it is now. But we're living in such a different world that it can't really count as failure. It just counts now as like experience journey. Yeah. My father had 5 marriages, you know. So
go him.
I just like, God loves a trier, you know.
Yeah.
What an optimist. To think I can do it again. Good for him, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll share another one because I think this is really important, maybe particularly for women, because at the time, as I went on this journey, I was told by a lot of women how inspirational it was and that it had really helped them. But I came out of my second marriage and I was telling myself, I've always had a money scarcity thing.
Oh, yeah.
Poverty mindset. A
lot of us
right?
have that.
Yeah, poverty mindset.
Yeah, you're not alone.
And I came out of it telling myself the story. Well, every marriage breakup sets you back 10 years, and I've just gone through my second, so I'm now set back 20 years. So I'm now like in my 20s again, and I'm never going to get ahead, right? So woe is me, poor me, little violins.
And
then I realised that no one was telling that story to me except me, right?
Yep.
So I was thinking about how I was going to do the next chapter of my life financially and on my own, because I'm not looking for a sugar daddy. I'm not looking to be saved, but how do I do this without being the victim? And because I was telling myself the story, I'm only going to be able to afford a shitty house in a shitty suburb, but I want to keep my kids safe. And I was like, what a defeatist story to tell myself. Yeah. And I was listening to podcasts at the time on like thought work and things like that. So it was really helping to give me some framework around it. Yeah. And I decided to write in a book what I wanted the next chapter of my life to look like, not talking about money. So my list went something like, I want to live by the bush. I want to live by the water. I want to not have to drive my car every day. I want to have community nearby. You know, like it was all the things that just made me feel really amazing when I wrote them down. Like I get to create. Yeah. I get to create this. I'm not the bystander. This is the life I want. So I wrote it all down. And I started manifesting it through intention. So I came across the town that I chose to move into and was like, yeah, I drove through this a few years ago and I loved it and I hadn't thought about it. But actually I wanted to be in the Waikato and here's a cool town. And look, the bush is there and the river's there. So I wasn't even probably consciously noticing the list. It was more just like an overall intention. And so it set me on this incredible journey where I learned, and one of the other things I was learning was to love things lightly. So when you come across something, don't put a heavy burden on it, but love it lightly. Like, yeah, that'd be great. But if it's not flow, then I let it go, right? Love it lightly.
Yeah. Oh my God. Can you just give me a bit more about love it lightly? Just,
okay.
Sorry to
So what I did,
great.
What I did was, and I went on this massive journey of, I'd gone from, and I'm a pretty confident person, as a career woman and all of that. But I realized that I was still nervous about the idea of thinking about buying a house on my own.
Right.
And so I jumped into it and I was like nervous about ringing an estate agent, which is so weird. And then within a week, I was like, whoa, shit. I've been talking to an estate agent, a lawyer, what else was I talking to? The bank manager and all of that all in 1 week. And I was like, I'm nailing this. And so, loving it lightly was I started looking for properties and it was at the beginning of 2021 and all the LVRs were off and the prices were going through the roof and a lot of houses were selling before they were hitting the market. Like it was the boom period. And so I was having to work really fast. And so I was looking at homes and I would walk into them and go, yeah, I could see myself here, but I'm going to love it lightly. Like if it happens, then it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It just means that something better is down the road for me. And so I chose not to tell like my mum about every house I looked at because I didn't want her to love it heavy and her to be disappointed if I then said it doesn't work. So I just kept it all inside and I was like, I'm just going to it was like a little experiment on myself. Like, can I love something lightly and walk into a home and go, yeah, I can picture this, but I'm not going to be devastated if it's not, and I'm going to trust it.
So great. There's so much flow with this. What you're describing, I think people do attach themselves to things, and that's when for some people that would be a form of loving it heavy, right? Oh, I got it. This is the thing. This is so important. Or I've viewed this one, so I must have that one. Oh, I didn't get it. Oh, the devastation. There's too much attachment to that outcome.
Yeah, it's attachment, right? And so it's not the sort of belief that the universe is working for you. Yeah, and I kind of didn't realize how insanely brave this was at the time, or how magical it was. I just was choosing not to be the victim of my life anymore. Wow! And so I looked and looked, and things kept falling over or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. Something better will come along. Something better will come along. And you guys know, you've been to my home. I ended up building a house and finding out that I could build a house for the same price as I was looking to buy. Right. And I never thought that I could build a house, particularly on my own. And I then went, that's funny, because my dream was always to do that. And my dream was always particularly to design a kitchen for my home. So I was like, gosh, all my dreams are coming true. And I didn't even intend for that to happen, but I put an intention out to not be the victim and to love it lightly and just enjoy the process. So everything flowed, and it was really the first start of me just understanding how tangibly flow feels like. So I had one day where I could where I wasn't busy with my kids, where I could go down and talk to the building company of my choice, and everything flowed. And within 45 minutes, I knew how much it was going to cost, and that my design that I wanted was going to, like, everything flowed.
Wow!
It was like magic sprinkles everywhere. And so I decided then that I could do this, and that I would only work with people that didn't treat me less than for being a woman on my own, and that didn't treat me like a number. And so I put that intention out that, I'd only talk to a bank manager that respected me. Because as a woman, when you show up with a man, they talk to the man. And when you show up alone, sometimes you don't get that respect. So I was like, well, I want to enjoy this. So I'm going to want to enjoy every interaction that I have. And that's what happened. Every single person I dealt with along the way, a lot of them became friends, and some of them, like the woman at the building company, one of them came up to me at one meeting and she said, I'm really embarrassed to tell you this, but you're such an inspiration to me. And I've just put my deposit down on mine because I'm a single mum too. And just to hear how inspiring it is to just walk in brave. And it was huge. It was huge. So that was massive for me, because I realised that I was like manifesting through pure intention. And so I set this intention that my home was going to be a place of healing and a place of calm. And it is.
Well, can I just say that there's so much that I got out of that just there, because I think that's what I needed to hear right now where I'm at today. The concept which I'm going to go forth in my life, and I'm going to call it loving it lightly, has got to be what I need right now for the sense of flow that I'm really in need of and working with and finding. Actually, I'm really happy about that for myself, but I think that nails it, because I'm going to remember that as a tenet, to love it lightly. Because as I go about new ventures and new things, there's always that sort of, I hope this works out, or gee, it would be good if, and I can really let it go with knowing that's okay. I'm just going to love this lightly. It's going to be okay. I see people who are quite successful in some areas of their life, and we often refer back to examples in acting, because Rob and I know that area quite well, and that world and the successes and failures of it. And I think some of the people who do quite well love it lightly. They give it a go and they go, that'd be nice. But then they detach and move on from the last audition. And that's still something very relevant in my life with the other things that I do, where sometimes you start off a business venture and you've got to not hold on and squeeze the life out of it. It has to have its natural flow.
So when you talk about that, when you're observing someone who's doing that, does it kind of grind sometimes because it looks like they're a bit blasé about it?
Yeah, I think it can. Like if you're in a negative space, you can be, they always get what they want, or that's so easy for them. But that's the same thing's been said of me from some people. It's easy for you, or you find that, well, my overnight success may have been a product of 30 years unseen, but I like to think that when people think something comes easily to me, little do they know, and I think it's a common story, that I've been thinking about the way I do something for a very long time. And if I appear to have the confidence to stand in front of a group of people and speak to them, you just don't know how many times I've rehearsed for that in my head and prepared. And I could never do that. Well, I couldn't either until I had that 65th rehearsal about how I was going to do it. Some things take effort. But even so, when there are things that are an element of chance, are an element of flow, are an element of out of your control, I think you've got to love it lightly, because you have to be able to let go if it doesn't work out, and that not be the end of your world.
Yeah. And that's what I think flow is. And it's funny when you talked about when people think you've had it easy, and I was thinking the difference between easy and ease. Like to have ease is flow, but it doesn't mean that it was because you were lucky and things came to you. It's more that you set an intention, right? So to me, like learning about intention and the power of pure intention, like when your intention is pure and your vibration is high, kind of got nothing to fear, right? Because it's
for our listeners. Like I think our listeners will understand what intention is, right? But you mentioned pure intention, which is quite a different languaging surrounding it. Can you describe more, or the pure intention, what that feels like, or what that?
Yeah, I think probably for me, maybe it means for me, like I don't have an agenda that would be anything other than the highest good.
Because you can have an intention, I want lots of money, I want an amazing sports car, but there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the pure intention sounds like it's got more of an aligned feeling to it, or it's more of something which is going to serve your soul, for example, or maybe serve a greater cause, or the bigger picture of your life. I'm sort of randomly saying things here, but
pure intention could also mean a simple idea. Like, and that's probably not what you mean, Rob, because I think where you're at, where the two of you are at with the idea of a pure intention, it's about the goodness of it, or that it's a nice idea and it's good for all involved and it serves everyone well. But a pure intention can also just be a very straightforward, focused idea.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to run that race. That's my intention. But then if we put it into this other concept, purity is that we're adding the idea of the goodness of it. It's going to be good for people. I wish no one any malice,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about me. It's good for everyone. Okay. That's cool too, because, I think we want to live good lives.
Yeah, and it's interesting thinking about that in the context of the story I was saying about my home. And at the time I didn't know about intention and pure intention, but I did know a bit about manifesting. And I look back and I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but the pure intention that I put into it was I was never just building a home to suit my purpose. It was because I felt like I wanted to create a home where other people could come and rest and heal and whatever it was. Like, it was always bigger than just me.
Right.
And so the intention in which I put into it wasn't just to suit a selfish purpose. It was to suit, like, it suits me. But I also want it to be a blessing to others, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether that be my children, my family, or friends, or people who need somewhere to rest. Like, there were thoughts. I didn't know at the time that I was going through the build, I didn't know that the world was quite what I know it is now. But I had these feelings inside of me that it was going to be a place for people to rest. And now I know why, Yeah. And people that do come there say that it's really restful. So, and I mean, it's not like it's not like a rehab centre or anything like that. It's just a home, but it's peaceful and people come there and be rested. And I think in this time where there is so much going on, there is so much noise, people appreciate the quiet and the still. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's got a lovely vibration, your home.
Thanks.
Even the way people have sat in your lounge and caught up, and you've got your big, nice, wide open space, and it stretches across into the kitchen, and you've got the TV up on the wall, and that's nice, it's out of the way, but also you've got it designed so you can run a PowerPoint presentation on it and catch up with friends and go, so look at this, and I'd like to show you this. And people get together at your place. You really bring people together in all walks of life. And I love how you've also managed to weed out people who have come together too quickly in your life and in our lives generally, who are actually who are ruled by fear, because people do come together very quickly, or have, I would say, over the course of this pandemic, because there are people who have felt the imposition of what was forced upon them and said, I don't want to take this or that medication or experimental drug. And people have come together very quickly, but some have soon realized that the people they're mixing with are really coming from a place of fear. And if that's not who you are, you soon don't gravitate towards them. And, you go back into your prior orbit to some extent, but a changed person. Yeah.
I feel like I think what I've noticed in recent times is it's a resonance. You have a resonance with people. And what I'm finding is, as I'm more comfortable in who I am and why I'm here, the resonance means that it's attracting other people like you guys that just seem to appear. And we're all at the same resonance, and it shifts things. And less am I coming across people that it's abrasive.
Yeah. Well, I suppose with if you're operating at a certain resonance, certain people are going to come into your life that feel called to, and that's sort of going to be a natural thing. You won't have to work hard for that.
And this is that whole ease thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's intentional. Like it's intentional for me to have a I set the intention now that I don't go looking for people. They come to me, and it's a resonance.
It's that whole don't chase, I attract philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Can you walk people through? I want to get back to where we got up to after Loving It Lightly and carry on with the story, by the way. So thanks for the rabbit holing for a moment there. But with regards to setting your intention, can you walk people through who are resonating with this idea of attracting people to you, what it is that you do, perhaps? Maybe there's a ritual or a process or a thought pattern that you now use, whether it's in the morning or at night or whatever, and you go, this is how I want the energy to be. What does that look like if you could put it into words or describe it?
So I'm not a person who, and I know I should, who spends more time in the quiet still, and I want to. I go out in the bush, but
I think it's overrated. You're just perfect the way you are.
Thanks. Some days, what I just say is just for today, I just want what is of the highest truth to come to my knowing and to come across my path, and everything that isn't to not. And then I just watch the day unfold and I watch who pops up.
That is
that simple.
That's essentially extreme mindfulness, isn't it? Extreme is extreme in itself. It's just mindfulness.
It's conscious awareness of your day, every moment.
Yeah.
Well, it's just so many people aren't.
Yeah.
That is a big deal. Yeah. But you just seem to have it right in place, right in the pocket. You're like, I got it. That's the thing I'm going for. It's amazing, eh?
Yeah, and I think you talk about, we were talking at the start about the journey, the spontaneous combustion. Just to go back to that, and I can only speak for my own journey, my journey was extreme. So all of a sudden everyone went away. Like my family, my friends, my job, my life, everything dropped away. And then I chose to walk away from my career. And so I jumped off a big cliff, and I checked if I didn't check. I hoped my wings would catch me, and they did. And so what that does is it's thrown me into a really intensive space of being in this space all the time. So the conscious awareness thing, I think for me, is really strong because everything that was familiar to me is gone. Whereas what I see with most people is it's not a judgment or it's not a good and a bad, it's just a different circumstance. So if you've got your career still and you're still in that frequency of being with people that may or may not resonate with you, but you're there because it's your job, or you're in a family where you've got, whether you have issues or not with your partner and you've got kids and all of that are all there, you're in those, you've very much got your feet in multiple worlds, which is majority of people. I wasn't that person. I jumped all the way off the cliff. And
can you tell me what happened that led you into the situation where this new superpower you've gained, which is like the coal under pressure until it becomes a diamond that you are now? Because I see the intensity of your energy, and that only happens through the fire of hell. What was this hell that you went through?
So if we go back to the 2020 stuff and the COVID stuff, I had a disquiet in my soul about it all, but I wasn't around anybody that I could really talk to about it. And I'd been looking. I actually went down the rabbit hole of 5G, and I talked to a couple of friends about it, and they're just like, don't look at that, just shut that off and keep going back to your normal life. And I got this sense of, I can't have an open conversation with the people I trust.
Which makes you suspect it even more, doesn't it? You say, well, why can't we just talk about it?
Yeah, it was kind of weird, but I was real normie raised. Like I totally pay your taxes, cross at the crossing, do everything right and tick all the boxes and be a good little girl.
There's some good programs to have. They're really hard to break.
It's really hard to break and to not feel guilty about breaking them. Yeah. So, there was a bit of a disquiet. I tucked a little bit of cash away because I had this feeling that the banks were going to go. This was back in 2020. And then I just went about my life. And I always felt that something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then 2021 rolled around and the jabby jabs started to be promoted, and I was like, you'd need like 7 years for that, wouldn't you?
It's spoken like it actually normally used to be.
Yeah,
We need
like actually legit.
7 to 10 years of clinical
don't even need
studies.
to,
Surely
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems a little bit of a rush.
Well,
and then
maybe they prepared it ahead of time. No,
It couldn't have been a pandemic.
no, it couldn't have been.
and I hadn't been aware that anyone was having those sorts of pandemic conversations. But but I was just like, no, it seems a bit rushed. And because I'd gone on my health journey and I was actually training to be a health coach and I was learning all about natural lifestyle intervention, I was like, I'm health's good, my immunity's good, I'm never gonna need a jab. And so all of a sudden I was seeing all the oldies were being, coerced into being jabbed, but I was like, that's never coming my way, I'm good. And then all of a sudden it did. With blinding force, feeling pressured at work. And I was like, there's something really strange about this. And then they went for the kids.
Right.
So they went for the 12 to 15-year-olds in August 2021. And I've got kids, and one of them was 15, one of them was 16. And I was on my school board. So I did my homework because of all of the kids. And it changed my life. Yeah, really quick, like within a week.
Yeah.
I figured it out. Like I figured it out within like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I went looking and I'd already done my own health research and other things before. So I knew how to do this. I knew that I was the one responsible for what was going on with my body and nobody else. And that stood me in good stead because I wouldn't call myself a researcher, but by God did I research.
Right.
Because if I was getting pressured to do something and I was saying no, I needed to know why. And so I fell down the rabbit hole really fast and we were in lockdown at that point, that second big New Zealand lockdown. Oh, just to go back a little, I was what I called on the border family. So we were on the border of Auckland and the Waikato, which is actually a significant part of the story.
Yes.
Because every single lockdown was different for me. As far as where I was living and what I was doing and who I was with. And my children were at school south of the border and we were north of the border. So my kids and a bunch of other kids.
Sorry, that's confusing for me. You were south of the border, but then you were north of the border?
We lived north of the border and the kids were schools south of the border. So there were lockdowns where the kids' school was going and they couldn't get there. So I see. And their sport was going and their friends could hang out with their friends, but they couldn't.
Almost like the border is halfway down the middle of your street kind of thing.
Kind of like West Germany, East Germany.
Coming down the road. Yeah. Okay.
And not many people get that unless they lived through that. But it was a psychologically traumatic time, even though the lockdowns themselves were kind of fun.
And for kids who can't participate in this school with all the rest of their mates, it's not like they're in a school where everyone else is locked down at home. They've got to stay in and the rest of the guys are on the field.
And how do you explain that to them? Because it's all out of our control, it's all being done to us regardless of what we choose to believe.
Yeah.
So,
I was just going to say that there was a good opportunity to check in with whether you're playing a victim, right? I saw it as a great opportunity.
Interesting.
To see where the fear is within your own being and whether you're going to fall into victim mode or how strong that programming is within you and how, so I just thought I'd
Well, actually, that's a really interesting point because that first big lockdown in March 2020, I chose in that moment to be really mindful about how I dealt with it. So at a time when a lot of people were getting drunk every night and not really caring what day it was because they didn't have to go to work or either because it was just one big long weekend or because they were really stressed out, they were hitting the bottle.
Either or,
I chose to not drink. I chose to not watch the news. I chose to exercise really well. And we did like online boot camps and I went out in the bush every day. Now, I did that just because for me, I wanted to see how well I could come out of it. And I also had my structure. So I was working from home and I had my routines and I didn't want to lose my head.
Is this when you were at your last job there?
This was in March 2020 when it first happened. The first lockdown.
And work was coping with all that. They were dealing with that.
We were, I was working from home most of the time anyway. So we were thinking, I was in a marketing role. And so I just went hardcore into brand, promotion.
But just, sorry, you kind of mentioned it, that the force and the pressure that came down was on the kids for the vaccine, but not at work?
Oh, so this was when COVID first hit. Like this was I'm sorry, I've just gone back to 2020. Gotcha. Yeah, which was like learning to actually maintain my own bodily autonomy as far as staying fit and healthy, and coming out of. I came out of that lockdown like fitter and healthier than I was going into it, which not many people could say.
No, because a lot of people were like, "I'm going to learn a language. I'm going to get in touch with my friends more overseas." Nothing. They just got pissed.
Yeah. And I actually had things like I wanted to. Organize all of my photos and do a whole lot of really cool stuff. But I actually was busy just being in my routine, exercising and stuff. So I came out of it. Cool. Yeah, cool. So that was a good lesson in like self-management and not being the victim. Like that's how that came about. So 2021, the jabs came, and so I had this moment where. Fairly traumatic personal experience, but I went out into the bush and I had it was a very spiritual weekend. There was wasn't even aware of spiritual stuff at that point, but energetically there was big shifts going on. And I talked to a friend down the road and she'd felt it too. But I felt this intense spiritual thing happening. Don't even really know what it was. And I was just guided to open a book and start reading, and I was having kind of awareness, really, really strong awareness of not only what was going on with the jabs and the politics, but just there was a spiritual awareness going on. And the next morning I went out into the bush and I went for a walk, and I just knew something was going to happen. And I sat down, and this bird flew over me, and I just was like, "What is it?" And it wasn't an audible voice, but I was told this. It's not your job to save the world. Listen, connect, and tell stories. And I went, I can do that.
God, that really resonates with me. You know, how many times I've said to Rob, I give up, man. I know that I'm here for the cleanup.
Yeah.
I can't keep telling people to look at this information and wake up. If they're not waking up, if they just turn around to you and say, "Sorry, mate, I'm just following the Ministry of Health guidelines because that's, well, then you just go back to your programming." Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I came out going, that's a relief. It's not my job to save the world. Thank goodness. Because we can't bear the weight of the world on our shoulders. Like it's actually really, really profound.
It is very profound.
And so I came out going, listen, connect, and tell stories. And I was like, yeah, I'm not a very good listener, so okay, I hear it. Connect. I quite like connecting and telling stories. I'd realised I had marketing and comms background, and I had noticed that over the previous year, my writing skills had improved, and I wasn't quite sure why. And I was like, okay, I'm preparing myself for this. So in that moment, what I saw was every connection I've ever made and every skill I've ever learned is for this time.
Yeah, huge believer in that. Everything that's led you to this point in your life has led you to this point. Yeah. The analogy of you're creating your own story, every sentence, every page of your story, every chapter is being created by you, and it's all leading
it's powerful.
to where you are now. Yeah.
And really when you see it like that, you're not the victim of your life and your story anymore. You're like, I was the creator, but I chose these lessons to learn to make me ready. The other thing, and you guys will laugh at this, and because I think I've talked to you about it in the past, is I saw everything in the movies. Because I was like, whoa, the Matrix is real. Yeah. And then the big one was Guardians of the Galaxy.
Ooh,
I love Guardians of the Galaxy.
I love it.
Our favorite. Yeah, that really resonates me. And I can't tell you specifically, but it's like a spiritual something going on.
Well, I'll tell you what it is.
So funny.
Guardians 2 was like me and my kids' favorite go-to. And I was like, and I came out of the bush and I was like, I was thinking about that movie, and I was thinking about, I don't know what her name was, but she's the empath. The
Mantis.
bug lady.
Mantis.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, I just totally got something different about that. Mantis. And I was like, I literally was like, it's the empaths that save the world. And I was like, and I go, this is literally, I so remember this.
Yeah.
I got to find the empaths. And then I went, oh, I'm an empath. Oh, it's me. I'm an empath. I didn't know I was an empath because I was, and I didn't know this at the time, but this has been my journey. I was working too much in my masculine.
Right.
Good discovery.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, like as a
yeah.
single mum,
Important realization.
raising boys, living in a masculine world,
We can all
working in
do
a
that.
masculine. Yeah, we can all do that. But for me, I was like, I need to balance that.
Did you discover that at that precise moment there, or
No, afterwards.
Okay.
I started finding more and more. I'd never heard about feminine masculine balance. You know, the divine feminine, divine. I'd never heard those frameworks.
Right.
And so, but very quickly that became a focal point of my journey.
Spontaneous combustion.
It's
I was totally spontaneous. Like I fell in the deep end like
some
way
people find
fast.
that stuff real fast.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That's
just
brilliant because I love the topic. I've always wanted to talk about the divine masculine and feminine energies.
Ooh, let's talk
Next
about
week
it.
on Reality Hub.
But have you heard of the Hermetic principles? Yeah. Ancient principles. The seventh is gender, which is everything there. You know, and everything has masculine and feminine energies. And, you know,
how topical.
Yeah, I know.
They've twisted it though, right?
And I won't go into deep here.
Let's do that next week.
but there's some fundamental things that when you understand. Yeah, those principles kind of are really important, and particularly, at our current evolutionary process when it's such a big topic, and why it's causing such divisiveness, and it's a huge one at the moment.
It's a really huge one, and I think it starts with that personal journey of identifying in self. Like for me, I was like, wow, I was working way in my masculine, which was. I was out of alignment.
Yeah.
Right. And so it took me a really long time to figure out what this all meant and then what it meant when I looked internally. And know that I can work in both. Like some days my masculine comes forward and that's what's needed, but I can come forward in my feminine as well. And so can we all. Like it isn't a defining granular thing that we just permanently are. It's more the acknowledgement for me of going, oh yeah, I was working in my masculine too much. And if what I realized later was working in my feminine more, being in my balance, that's my empathic capability.
Right. Yeah.
As a more of a feminine thing. And the world needs empaths. That was what I got when I was thinking about guardians and the mantis.
Yeah, what a wonderful insight.
It's so funny. It's so funny because I just had forgotten her name, but last week I was somewhere in a meeting and I was speaking and I felt that I was being given something to speak. So I was speaking authoritatively. And a mantis came and landed on me and I couldn't get rid of it. And it was on my hand for about half an hour as I was speaking. And I was like, what's the meaning of this? And it wouldn't go away. And I was like, the animals and the insects kind of come to me now, which is weird. And I hadn't never thought until you just reminded me of her name.
That's interesting because, I sense that you have a great connection to nature, you know, and you're obviously drawn to it. So, you pick up these little synchronicities and coincidences, which of course there are no synchronicities and coincidences when you really tune in and you're connected. When you can decipher or acknowledge.
Have you ever walked through the bush and just seen the patterns everywhere?
Not for a while.
Have you not? It's amazing.
But I will say this though. An old spiritual teacher of mine said that the praying mantis was a sign that spirit is near.
Oh, thank you for that.
Because they are symbolic of wisdom.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for gifting me that.
You're welcome.
Nice.
Well, there you go.
But to explain more about the patterns, because, you know, when the last time I was, a proper bush or forest or, I feel energy rather than, but maybe I'm not tuning into the patterns so much. So in in the bush, like on a panga trunk, like everything's patterns, and then you look at the panga leaves, and you look at all the leaves, you look at the dainty little leaves of everything, and they're either offset from each other in perfect order or exactly balanced in perfect order. Like when
is that the Fibonacci sequence?
It is. Everything is, and you look at a spider web, and it's like sometimes when you that's the most magical time for me in the bush is when I stop thinking. Because it's a really big one, stop thinking and just be present and then be like, wow, there's magic everywhere. There's magic everywhere. And actually, this is the gift of creation and we are connected to it. So actually, we have nothing to worry about. And that's a big thing too, is like, you watch the birds and you're like, and this is actually biblical, I think, but, the birds of the sky never worry about where they're going to live and what they're going to eat. They just are. And we confuse ourselves so much by stressing out about everything. And it's like, everything's going to be okay. Because we are here, you know, everything is in divine order and we have pure intention.
Set an intention and love it lightly.
Yeah. It's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It makes it sound a bit too simple, but when everything gets really overwhelming, you just take a deep breath. And,
sometimes it's good to have a simple.
And that's one of the things too is going back to like right here, right now. Like right here, right now, I'm safe. Like right here, right now, I'm safe. When you're really stressed, and I've used that to help a few people who get really overwhelmed. As you know, all the things that you're worrying about is projecting into the future things that may or may not happen. But right here, right now, you've got a friend. Right here, right now, you've got a roof over your head. You know, and trust.
So you're on the board. The jabby jab's coming out. What happened then?
Ooh, I tried to find. So the first thing that I did was I needed to write down in some sort of sense of order what I had found. And it was like all up in here, and I just needed to get it out. And this whole.
You need to inform the rest of the school parent board.
Well, it was actually
because they're making some heavy decisions that every kid's going to have to be vaccinated.
I didn't send it to the board. In fact, I wrote it all out because I needed to articulate what I'd found scientifically, and I just was in flow. I suppose I wrote my first ever blog on this, which is the moment that changed my life. I didn't realize I was writing a blog. I just was writing a document, and it was referenced back to things like the MedSafe data and the Pfizer trial data. I was referencing scientific data. I was learning myself to be a researcher. I was looking at the definition of a pandemic because it really started with that. Like, let's look at the numbers and let's decide whether we think it's a pandemic. And it's quite simple. And just to say, at the time at which I wrote this, was right when all of our Facebook friends were posting that thing that said, no, I don't know what's in the jab, but I also don't know what's in a Big Mac. You know the one? Did you have friends that did that? Yeah. Sure. And they were putting like I got vaccinated on their Facebook profile picture.
Virtue signaling.
And total virtual signaling. And so what I felt was if you're even considering having another viewpoint, are you going to even get heard? And so I was quite strong in what I wrote, but it was like, hey, you guys are all having your say, so guess what? I do too. And my say isn't saying I'm ignorant to it. It's saying here's the facts. Here's the facts I found, and this is me, my body, my choice, making my decision about my body. So I wrote it. I sent it to 4 people I cared about. I lost 3 of them pretty much immediately. And one of them challenged me how far I was going to push this story. So I was like, well, I suppose I can put it on a blog. And I suppose when I put it on my blog,
they challenged you in a positive way.
Challenged me in a positive way to say, they said to me, what's the purpose of writing it?
Yeah.
And I said, I want to help people. And really what I was doing, not really realizing it at the time, was I was going fishing among my network to see who knew what I knew, because it's a pretty lonely place to be in a lockdown with no one around you that knew what you knew or wanted to hear it. And to not really know. What I actually felt at the time, without thinking I was being fully in fear, was I'm finding information that could get me killed, because clearly they don't want you to know this, because clearly they have an agenda. Clearly they want people to know something, and I figured out something else that's the truth, and I am at risk here, and I don't know at what lengths they would go to shut me up. That was how I felt. And so I shared it out, and I got quite a lot of, I think a couple of thousand people read it in the end, but I found quite a lot of friends that actually were like, I felt the same, but I thought I was the only one. You're so brave for saying this, and thank you. And there was one comment of a person saying that they were about to go and get jabbed and they didn't feel right about it, and it was encouraging them because they saw how I'd written it was, yeah, I felt that too. But so I know I saved lives. Just through that, and I found among my network a few people that believed what I believed, but by and large, I got massively unfriended and blocked and gaslit really, by some of the people closest to me. So that was tough. But that was a real baptism by fire of, well, the truth is the truth. And I came across something quite a while later, which is really key, which is there's pragmatic people and there's principled people. And when you find something that you truly believe in, if you're principled, you'll stand in it no matter what it costs you, versus pragmatic people who bend and shift depending on how it serves them. You know, and unfortunately,
before I heard you say that for the first time, which is going back a month or two or 3 or 4, I used to think pragmatic was a positive word. I really used to view, it's pragmatic. You got to get done what you got to get done. Let's just be. To me, it was interchangeable with the word practical. Yeah, let's just be practical here. But to define it like that pragmatic really means just whatever serves you in the moment. Meaning you can flip flop all over the show. Like you know, one day I'm left wing, one day I'm right wing, and it's just whatever suits me in the moment. You go, oh yeah, that's shit. That just holds no sense of truth or knowledge of who you are or willingness to do the right thing and have principles.
Yeah, and principles is it's kind of a bit of a forgotten art, I think, for a lot of people and maybe our generation and younger, but especially with all the gaslighting. But pragmatic can be great, but it can also be what was I going to say? It's self-serving. Yeah. Because like you say, it's like so humanity by large, from my understanding, is that we lean towards comfort. We move towards comfort. We don't like discomfort. We move towards comfort. So comfort would be being pragmatic. Ooh, it's making me uncomfortable to think that I have to, if I do this, I get that. So I'm going to move towards the comfort option, you know? And so to jump outside of comfort and choose truth is a real test to our spirit. Yeah, you know, which is why on the other side of this, the new soul family that I have met, I'm so grateful for them and I'm so proud of us all because we've had to stand principled even if we're standing alone and even if we're getting beaten down, even if we're getting shit thrown at us. This is like, well, no. And I will say, you know, this is a hill I'm willing to die on and I could lose everything, but I couldn't go back to lying. I couldn't go back to pretending I don't know what I know. You just can't, right? You can't unlearn what you learn.
I was going to say the same thing. Once the eggshell has been cracked, you can't. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Once you've taken the red pill, once you've awoken, once you've had that shift, you can't go back.
It's like peeping behind the veil.
Yeah.
And I actually think a lot of people, I think about like peeping behind the veil or popping your head down the rabbit hole. And I totally forgive and get that some people peep and go, holy shit, I wish I hadn't known. I wish I hadn't known. I wish I hadn't known. I just go put my head back in the sand. I get it. I absolutely don't have judgment for those people because it is scary. And I always say I wouldn't have wanted to wake up any later than I did. I think I just snuck in there just in time before the shit really hit the fan. And
well, this is why I don't judge people who made a different decision to me because I still want my old friends. If they have to pass me in the street and give me a hug, I still want that goodwill.
100%.
You know, and I love them. When they wake up to a reality I believe will eventually occur to them, what they'll go through is horrific.
And you want to be there for them, right?
Absolutely. I'm here for the cleanup.
And I get that too. And unfortunately, the people in my life didn't seem to think the same. It made them uncomfortable or it made them think too much or whatever it was that was going on for them. It was easier for them to hate on me. And at that time, I wouldn't have been strong enough to fight it anyway. I just realized that I actually knew that it was like what I saw was, and I didn't even know about energy, frequency and vibration then. I was just like, literally, we're talking a different language. Yeah. So I'm talking a language and you're talking a language and we can't hear each other. And I came away from it all in a rush and went, it's not even personality. Like this isn't even about feelings. We just can't hear each other. And so I let go of my judgment, not to say I let go of my pain and despair at losing a lot of close people really fast and what I knew they were saying about me. But it was literally like, there's no point in me fighting it. I've just got to go be me. I've just got to go find out who I am and I've just got to go do what I've got to do. And I've got to, I know that that's happened, but it's not my job to go clean that up because they created that, not me. I just stepped into the truth, and it was shocking.
Mm.
And they didn't care. They didn't seem to ask me how I was or anything like that. They just gaslit me.
Mm.
So I just walked away. Yeah. So it was huge.
So what happened after that?
So I went away somewhere on my own pretty much for a few days. And now I know that what I was doing was being in a completely fifth dimensional state.
Ooh.
And I realize now that some people that probably end up institutionalized were having that elevated state, and they were around other people who thought they were mad. But thankfully, I'd gone away on my own. But I remember just like I was out at the beach, and I was walking along the beach, and like everything was a different color, and I was seeing things real sharp. And I was talking to myself like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I get it. And I was like, I didn't even recognize myself. Then my mum came to see me for a couple of days, and I was talking really fast, and I would like sleep for an hour, and then I'd get up and I'd write, and I'd be shaking, and it was so weird. Like I was having a massive alteration and a download, and just it was trippy, accelerated brain cell work. I couldn't even, I'll never forget that experience. And I wasn't eating, and I wasn't sleeping, and it wasn't fear. It was just, I just was changing. And then after a couple of days, I was like, whoa, now I have to kind of find my way back into being normal in the real world, because I can't stay here forever.
You would have to integrate all that.
Yeah. I was like, how do I integrate it?
There's a process of integration after all that. But that's fascinating that you went through that. Yeah. And it makes sense because you were ripe, resonant to it. Yeah. And it all just came suddenly and really fast.
Yeah.
So
It was pretty crazy, and I'd created a little chat group, and with a couple of people that I'd figured out the truth through, who were kind of natural healers and things, and they'd invited a couple of friends in, and I was putting these things online, thinking what I thought I was doing was catching up to everybody else. Right. I thought I was, I'm late to the party, I'm catching up with everybody else. So I was writing these things, and then one of the girls rang me, and she's like, no one really understands what you're talking about. You're freaking people out.
I wouldn't say you're catching up. I'm thinking you're steps ahead.
Yeah. And so she said to me, and I've never actually met her face to face, which is funny, but she said to me, you're a starseed. I've been waiting for you for 7 years.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm a what? And so she was,
you're a guardian of the galaxy.
Yeah, go the mantis. But yeah, I was like, okay. So what happened even right back then was the odd person would just come to me and just be like, hey, and be like a guide for that time to really help me go, I'm not crazy. There's something really magical is happening. And so then I got curious about it, and then I learned about it, and then I'm like, wow, that makes sense. So it was pretty amazing. And then you don't ever want to go back. I don't ever want to go back to who I was, because this is a gift, that I was clearly open to, or at the time I just felt like I was this empty vessel. Like I'd been pretty hard few years. I was this empty vessel. There was no ego left in me. I was fully surrendered, like bring it on, I think that was a big thing. And then I found, sorry.
No. I just got chills because, that whole ego identity destruction, dismantling is the kind of the program that's dissolved, so that your true essence you start coming from your heart and your soul, and that's like boom. It's the George Cavassalis turning the inside out,
turning the arrows inward.
Turning arrows inward, it's just like that's what it is. And I know it's hard to articulate and put into words what you go through, but it's just, I'm sure I could feel it. I'm sure Steve could feel, like sometimes it's not a conscious thing. It's a full body.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Because it's
to feel it at a cellular level.
Yeah, cellular level. Yeah, like at a body level. Yeah, it's great.
It's intense. Like I feel like my story is a bit intense for some people. So apologies if this is intense.
It's never too intense. This is not at all. Not at all.
All right. So what did that lead to then?
So very rapidly, I came across different people. So one of them is a friend, Ray, who you'll know. I was put in touch with him, and we started chatting. And I started going to meetings to see that there were other people like me, but they weren't like me, if you like. In fact, that was where I met you. It was the very first time at a Waikato Freedom Network meeting. I met you and a whole bunch of people, and that was the first time. That was like a couple of weeks after. You'll remember that.
I do remember it well.
I spoke, and I didn't know anything about anything, but I showed up, and
wearing a checkered
channeled.
shirt.
Yeah, I was like a cowgirl. Yeah, it's funny. And I just felt like something just dropped in for me to say. And so I spoke. And I was kind of used to public speaking by then, but it was not in that framework, just more in a career sense. And so you and a few other people came up to me that I literally stood rooted to the spot for about 2 hours, and people just came up to me. I didn't know a single person. There was about 70 people at that meeting, I think. And I walked up going, I don't know a single person here, but okay. These are these freedom people that know what's going on. And and just people came and spoke to me, and I got asked if I was a preacher, if I was a speaker, if I was a this and I was a that. And I was like, I don't know anything. I don't know really what's going on. But whatever I said landed. And I had people come to me for a long time after that going, those things that you said that day changed my life. And so I realized that I'd been gifted something, and I would be given stuff to say, or I'd be at a meeting thinking I'm not going to say anything, and then I'd just be like, I've got to say something. So it was kind of just surrendering to that. And then also always like checking the ego of like, am I saying this because there's judgment and it's coming from here, my head, or is it something that's just landed in me? And it's kind of a channeling, I suppose, but I didn't even realize at the time. So I don't know. But it was just really being open to it and being brave. But then along that journey was also learning about the government corporation and the birth certificate fraud, and really unpacking everything that I really believed about the world that I was in. So the scales come off the eyes in multiple dimensions then, because you realise
the topic of living man, living woman.
That everything that we thought was who we are was the paper version of ourselves, but it wasn't our soul essence and our living being. So that took a long time to go from my head to my heart, because I started to see it out there in essence, you know.
Yeah.
You can learn it up in your head, although it's a lot to learn. But as you walk around the world and you're observing things and you're starting to see it differently and you're feeling differently.
It's the biggest journey you'll ever take.
It's huge.
Your heart, from your head to your heart. Most people never take that journey, believe it or not.
It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once, right? Because you want the truth. More than anything else, I just want the truth. And so we find the other truth seekers. So also, and amongst that though, I was rapidly going on many journeys, but I was learning how to live on not much money. And I was learning how to show up places where I didn't know anybody. And I was also learning about trauma, about your own shit. And realizing, and it took me a while probably to articulate what was going on, but this whole, what I know now to be that when things come up, it's coming up because you need to go through the lesson. And so you're purging all of the preconditioning and all of the victimhood stuff and all of your internal stuff. It's like a clearing out. You know, and it's going to keep coming up until you deal with it. So if it comes up and you push it away, if it comes up again, you push it away, and then it comes up and you go, shit, I don't want to have to learn this lesson again. So what is it? So I call it like unpacking it. It's okay, this thing's come up. So I'm going to unpack this and I'm going to find out the lesson in here. And then once you learn that that's a pattern too, it's like, oh, something's coming up. What's the lesson? You get through it faster. This is coming up now. What's the lesson? And sometimes it goes for days and it's really painful, but you're still like, oh no, it's a lesson. I know it's going to be better on the other side, but this really sucks and it really hurts. And so recently, so that's been like the thing for the last few years. And then recently I feel like I did this thing where I call scraping the bottom of the barrel of it, which to me was going right back to my primal wound in this life. And that came up maybe 3 weeks ago. Regards to my dad. And I was like, it's here now. I was, it was like, hopefully some of the people listening to this will remember that day because they were in the room with me when this grief came up that I wasn't ready to, I didn't know it was coming. And here it was. And instead of me pushing it away, I was like, I'm so glad it's finally here. I'm ready now. And it's cool to get to that point where you know where the lesson's coming because it's here to help you.
What might that look like for someone to understand what their primal wound is.
Mm.
And why is a primal wound important?
Well, for me, it was important because there are certain things that I don't think I can progress in my life until I've faced it.
Sure.
You know, rather than repeating patterns, because we're here repeating patterns, right? We're repeating generational patterns, but we're repeating lifetime patterns of stories we've told ourselves, victim stories, blame stories, and things don't get resolved until we take responsibility for them. You know, and so whether it's to do with relationships or how you deal with money or whatever it is that you're doing, until you actually look at it and sit in, it could be shame, it could be vulnerability, it could be grief, it could be despair, but until you face it and sit in it and are not afraid of it, it's going to probably keep coming back. And Brené Brown is an amazing woman to speak about stuff like that. So she was a big part of my journey, going back sort of 4 years when I listened to her TED Talks about vulnerability. And she talks about we numb. Like in our culture, we numb. So when shit comes up and we don't want to feel it, we'll drink or we'll do drugs or we'll, you know, do porn or we'll do whatever it is that we do to move away from the discomfort and into comfort. And so, you know, I'd already taken away any of those things anyway, so it becomes more raw. But it's like, well, actually, I'm not going to learn the lesson. I'm not going to evolve until I actually face it.
The thing that came up for me is that we've lost the art of feeling emotion, which is, we were talking about this before, Steve, energy and motion. So it's a normal, organic human process, whether it's grief, despair, whatever it is, joy, happiness. So, you know, we're taught to disassociate, to numb, to distract, to not listen to it, to not embody our emotions and allow our emotions to flow naturally. And then, you know, the body has its own wisdom to transmute, transform, you know, just like waves in the ocean, the weather. So, yeah, I think that's a huge one, is that we've lost the art of actually feeling and being human, and every emotion is valid. And I think, you know, I know from my experience, you know, suppressing emotions, it gets stored in the body, and that's where trauma comes from. And then it needs to be cleared, right? So you talk about purging, that's what you've been doing. All these emotions, all these past hurts, traumas, generation, wherever they are, stored in the body, are coming up to be cleared, transmuted, transformed. And then look at you, you're just expanding, and
Yeah, you know those days when you can be driving along the road and you can be laughing and happy, and then all of a sudden you get overcome with grief and you have a bit of a cry. And the trick is to not judge yourself.
Not judge, non-attachment, non-judgment.
It's just be like, hey, I'm going through a process and I'm growing.
Yeah, because the mind wants to label it, wants to stop it, because that's the way we've been programmed, rather than just allowing. That's perfectly normal and perfectly valid, because children do it when they're young. But if you're told, you know, you can't cry, or, you know, harden up, or whatever that is, then that's already the program suppressing something which is just natural within every human being. Yeah. That's what it means to be human. And we have such a huge spectrum of emotions, and that's how we experience the fullness and richness of, you know, the world and everything. So, yeah, I just wanted to...
Yeah, it's crazy to think that all of that's been numbed out of us, right?
Yeah.
But I think, like, in the space that I'm in with people like us who are sort of are emotionally aware and are spiritually aware to that level, that's where we can have really authentic, raw conversations. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I've found in this journey, is when you show up authentically, so does the other person. And so you can create these safe spaces where you can see an emotion comes out, because it has to. You know, and you're not going to judge someone if they cry or if they shout or whatever it is. You just hold that space, and learning to be present for other people and showing up for them and showing up for yourself. Like that's how we do this. Like that's honestly, that's the most powerful thing that we can be here doing, because we're healing ourselves and each other as we see other people. Like I've been in situations, like in women's groups and circles, particularly, and things where you're just there and people feel comfortable because everyone's authentic and caring and loving, and then they just talk about things and they're like, I don't even know where that came from, and I don't think I was ever going to share that story, but here I am sharing the story. And we're like, cool, that's awesome, because it was a healing for them to speak it and to know that they were heard and loved and held and not judged. The non-judgment thing is really key.
Some people have never experienced that. to feel safe in an environment to be vulnerable and just to speak their truth. Because they have, the shame, the guilt, all the attachment, all the stuff that we deem, which is not good. As I say before, all emotions are valid.
Yeah, and
otherwise they wouldn't be there. Yeah.
The same kind of people tend to be very uncomfortable if someone else is showing emotion. And they have a need to, it's okay, honey. You have a tissue. Oh my God, can I? What? Or,
think a happy thought.
Or ignore it, or dismiss it, or judge.
Or a program to fix it.
Yep, or exactly. Yep,
find a solution. And you said it perfectly. Rob, that was holding the space.
Yeah, that was my first character.
The
fixer. But that's exactly right, man.
Yeah.
And you've got to know in yourself that it's okay to experience emotion in order to be okay that someone else does it.
Yeah.
I think.
And not have to rush in and go in and save them from it. It's just actually, literally just be present for it.
I think there's a balance of not rushing in to save them from it while at the same time holding energy that says it's okay. It's okay, just let it come. Yeah.
And just to go back to Brené Brown, one of the things that she said that I just live by is that vulnerability is a birthplace of courage.
Yes.
And like society has programmed us to think that vulnerability equals weakness, but it's bravery, it's courage, because you can't do anything, you can't create anything without being vulnerable. And you know this as creative people, you wear vulnerability on your sleeve when you're creating, because you can risk someone not liking your creative beauty, and this is how this works emotionally as well. As if you're going to be staunch all the time, then you're not letting anybody in.
It's especially brave when you know that everyone around you thinks it's weak. Because then it's even braver to allow yourself to have emotion when you know that you'll be harshly judged for it, and to go, actually, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah, actually, I know who I am.
Yeah,
and I think what I've learned on my journey hugely as well is that when observing the reactions of others, like, as an empath, and I'm pretty much sure all empaths feel the same, and probably even people who aren't, is when they see a behaviour come up in another person, they make it mean something about yourself. And your friend Neve Cronin talked about this, and when I listened to her podcast for the first time, which is on Reality Hub, episode, I want to say 53, but I'm not sure.
There was a couple.
Yeah, her first one.
The first one.
And she talked about basically as an empath thinking that what was going on in other people was her fault. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that was my life. But she talked about walking into a room and feeling the energy of the room and then making that mean something about herself. And I think that's like the primal wound that a lot of us empaths have, is thinking that everything's our fault, and getting to the point where I can observe people having a reaction to me or to a situation and being like, oh, that's nothing to do with me, that's them. It could be that I've triggered it. It could be that coming into my energy field has triggered something in them, but it doesn't make it my fault.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try and make it worse, but I'm also not going to dive in there and try and save you from it, because it's something that's been triggered. And for me, seeing that, then it's just my choice of whether I choose to stick around for that or whether I choose to leave you to it. It's a protection mechanism, because it takes you out of the codependent state too, of thinking that but for you, they wouldn't be saved. Like you could be triggering something or bringing up something for them, but it's their stuff, their lesson.
Yeah, it's important to have boundaries and discernment to know that it's not you.
It's not your fault.
Yeah, not your fault. Because when you are very sensitive, then you can take on those things. For instance, if you're a sensitive child and you might take on your parents might be angry or fighting, you might take that on board and then once again store that as a sort of trauma response. And so whenever you see other people, relationships, people close to you being angry or arguing, you might go, oh, that's my fault, because you would interpret it that way. That was just a sort of an example.
You do. And you think like you got to go
from
fix
your early
it,
programming.
Right?
Yeah, and then you've got to fix it. And you realize, no, it's nothing. No, it's nothing to do with you. It's between those people.
Yeah.
But you take it on board because you're very sensitive and open. And it's fascinating.
And I almost feel like we're at this clinch point in humanity now where there's so much generational trauma and there's so much generational programming that we're at the end point of the story. like what our generation and the kids that are here, they're experiencing the final outpouring of the damage done from that story. And I really believe that those of us that are here that know what's going on, that we have the power to break that generational crap. I think that's here what we're doing. And I just sort of think, God, it's like putting coffee grounds upon coffee grounds upon coffee grounds in a cup, and it's just getting stronger, because what we're all dealing with is the outpouring of generations of people who have done exactly what you're talking about. They have oppressed their vulnerability. They have oppressed their emotion. We're not to grieve. We put a bottle on everything. It's all coming out sideways. So now is when we have to deal with it. Like if we had another generation or two of trying to put a cap on it, I don't think there'd be much coming back from that. But we're here to unpack it now.
It's a real tipping point. Yeah. And, you talk about your podcast pendulum, that the pendulum does swing between, two polar opposites. And I think we are at that point where it's at one end of the spectrum where we need to address what you were talking about there. And, when you're tuned in to, everything that's happening and connecting it all and looking at it from the big picture, then we're just such an interesting and fascinating and...
It's actually an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah.
Some people wouldn't say so.
Some people wouldn't say so. But it's like we're in an evolutionary process, and there's always growing pains. So we're really in that, you can see it, all these systems that are breaking down, all these paradigms that are shifting, dismantling. These are these words that are sort of, I feel, that's happening, the dissolution, the extremes of things, there was extreme divisiveness, now there's extremes and, and left and right and all these points of view, but it's going to come back. It's got to come back to a balance at some point. The pendulum's got to swing back.
Hopefully it comes back to oneness.
Yeah.
Like it's got pretty extreme separatism, right, in every facet of society.
Yeah.
So it's got to come back.
What does oneness feel like to you? Because I know a lot of the spiritual gurus and leaders talk about oneness.
And then they ask you to suck on their tongue.
You had to bring it up, didn't you?
So bad, isn't it? To me, oneness is non-judgment of each other.
Nice.
Like when you can look at someone and not judge them. So Kyle Cease says he'd said it so well in one of his YouTubes, which was it was kind of I guess about consciousness, and he talked about it's like being on the ground level of a building and being like, whoa, everything's amazing, and then suddenly go up to the next level, and it's like the next level of sort of conscious awareness, and you're like, whoa, this is blowing my mind, this is freaking amazing, and then you keep going up and up, and because your awareness is becoming expanded, and then he goes, and then you get out at this elevator floor, and there's just this dude standing there. And he's like homeless, and you're just looking at him and all you feel is love. And I'm like, that's so profound. To get to that place where you just go, no judgment.
Yeah, it's like no separation, right?
No separation. We're all interconnected.
Yeah, we're all interconnected, yeah. So it's like, the ocean, you the one drop is, you are the ocean, and the ocean is in the one drop. So yeah. I mean, there's different interpretations of it. But yeah, when you get the I suppose the sentiment of it, or the feeling, or And
I get it sometimes. Like I definitely am not there. I'm definitely not there, but I'm definitely aware of it. Because when a judgment comes up, I'm like, oh, like, when I still see people wearing masks, and having to get to the point where I'm, damn it, I still had a reaction to that. Like, love them anyway.
Oh, that's great. Great self-control. Because I think it's so easy for me to go, really?
I know. Well, I saw a person today who had masked their kid, and we don't even need to wear it. And I'm just like, oh, it's the crime. And so I'm like, oh, damn it, there's judgment.
Yeah.
Like, right. We're not there yet, but it's the awareness of, they maybe just, they in their hearts, they're doing the right thing. They don't know what I know. And hey, they could be right. But what my truth is that's, that's all about suppression. I think the good thing is there's a good thing to come out of the fact that people still wear masks when they needn't. is that it does remind the world that we're not quite back to normal yet.
Yeah, and it does remind the world that we've gone through something which perhaps is an unacknowledged traumatic event. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that feeling, let's see, probably the end of last year. I felt a deep sense in my being of a post-traumatic. I called it the, what did I call it? I termed it something. But yeah, it's like we'd gone through this huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's like then it sort of dissipated or disappeared.
Do you think that's why collectively they're trying to say, it's all over and done with now, nothing to see here?
Yeah,
but because the trauma is so bad that they'd rather just pretend life is normal?
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out, trying to process. But I had this sense of, wow, we've just gone through all of this collective trauma. Who's doing the inner work of actually processing and integrating and learning from it? I kind of had this visualization of, it was like, you know, that scene in The Matrix where Neo and Morpheus are in the city environment. It's the woman with the red dress.
Yep.
And everything just pauses and they could be aware in a way, you know, it's like that was the moment when COVID hit and they could see beyond the veil. Okay. And then back to normal. Well, it's not back to normal, you know, but everyone just, you know, back to their walking through the street with their coffee, head down on their phone and going, wait, what? Do you realize what just happened? Didn't your whole paradigm just shift? Didn't you just
everything just changed?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good way of explaining
and the way here's really interesting. A lot of people that I knew before this have just reverted completely back as though nothing happened, like it was just a blip. And I just thought, wow, you know, how can you not be profoundly changed?
I wonder if it would be true to say.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be true to say.
That was just my interpretation. That's what I felt. But they were basically, so.
I wonder if it would be true to say that those that completely reverted back as if nothing happened were the ones that lost the most.
Explain lost the most.
Well, it's as though for them nothing's occurred, nothing's changed, nothing's been lost.
Right.
Whereas for those of us who feel like we really went through something, there was a huge change. And in fact, sometimes tremendous loss, huge decisions to be made about whether you would or wouldn't vaccinate, whether you could or couldn't have Christmas with people that year. For some people I know, deeply traumatized by the way they were treated because they were not towing the line, and yet they have a true sense of who they are, and they may have gained the most in the knowledge of what it is that they are, whereas those that were like, oh no, it's gone back to how things were, and they just kind of towed the line and took the jab, and they actually gave away the most.
Yeah, nice.
Didn't really know who they were.
Yeah.
And lived a lot in fear.
What do you think about the theory that some people that are here are just soulless or placeholders? What do you feel about that?
I don't believe it. It's a really interesting idea. Gaining a bit of I don't buy it at all. I think that they're souls as much as me or anyone else, but they're on a different journey, and their soul contract, I believe, is to participate with this stuff, where ours is to not. It's not to do so.
Yeah.
And that helps me. That helps me love it lightly. That helps me let it go. That helps me be in flow and not attached to the fact that this tremendous change is going to have happened to them versus me.
NPC, non-player character.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's the term that sort of was been thrown around, like from video games, you know, in terms of.
I see them as participating with that matrix.
Yeah.
I see them as needing at this point on their soul's journey to be a part of that, just as I'm sure I have at different points in different lifetimes in my soul journey participate with the matrix as much as I have given away my power in various times in my life, in this life and in other times in my multidimensional existence. They're doing that. That's their time. This is not I'm in a different place.
Yeah.
And they will be in a different place in another lifetime, at another point, on a different soul contract. Of course, they have souls. You can look into their damaged souls, or you can look into, your loved ones' equally damaged souls. And I don't say that lightly or judgmentally. We're all damaged, but, you can look into the eyes of people and go, there's a soul in there. Like, to the idea that it's a non-player character is sort of, to me, it's akin to that old-fashioned Christian thought that animals don't have souls. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I suppose, that gets thrown around. But, what about the psychopaths, that are out there? Have they got souls? Or are they just completely disconnected from their soul essence?
No, they have souls.
It's a hard one, isn't
It's
it?
a
When
hard
you think
one,
about like unity, consciousness, and oneness, like what's their role to play?
Yeah, well,
It's easy if you're going to judge them and go, oh, but what sort of person is that? And to go, oh, what a horrible being. Well, sure, but then who hasn't been that in some form of your existence? I mean,
right,
if you're one with the universe, then we're all that.
Yeah, if you're a fractal
too.
of the universe and the universe is expressing itself in infinite ways, then you, on your soul's journey, have had every experience, every archetype, and you're just going through the spectrum. Is that what you're sort of...
Well, if the creator of all that is wishes to experience all that ever is, was and will be, it includes some of that awful shit too.
Yeah.
And also you can't have the light without the dark. And I think
that's right.
It's really, really hard to get your head around that non-judgmentally, right? But I wouldn't know the brilliance of things without the pain.
Yeah.
Like if I lived a vanilla life, I'd be having a vanilla experience. And I obviously choose to come here to have extremes.
Yes.
Well, hallelujah.
And maybe, and I don't believe really in the non-player character thing either, because I think it's pretty judgmental. It's
I was going to say, it is judgmental.
What I look at it as, we're on a plane of free will and duality. We're playing this duality game, but we're aware of unity, which is above duality, but we're in it. It's like a game. It's a weird, messed up game. Actually, I came up with a funny, like I've always thought about like chess pieces, the chess pieces, and from everything to governmentally and spiritually and whatever. And now that we're so attuned, often we can see what's coming before it comes. Like we just know. And I'm like, they think that we're the pawns on the board, but we're looking down at the board. We're not even on it. We're down looking at it, and that's actually quite an inspirational, powerful way to look at it. It's like, no, I'm watching the game play out, but they think I'm the pawn.
We are the board.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm above the board looking down at it going, it's an interesting game they're playing.
Yeah.
It's like that whole being in the world, not of the world. And it's like being aware of that the matrix is all around of us, but I don't really want to participate in it. Yeah. And if I do want to, it's my choice. It's because I choose to, not because I'm trapped. Those pretty big mind-bending thoughts. So good to talk about it and not be locked away for it.
Well, it is the new dimension of reality that we're facing, to be able to talk about these topics, to understand it, be at peace with it, and resonate with it.
Well, nothing is too woo-woo for Reality Hub. I'm absolutely happy and open and curious to go in any direction, any time. I'm really I've always been like that. I've always been very curious to know things, to know what reality is about. What is this, human experience, and to not be really like in a fixed state of this is the way it is.
Belief.
It's just, there's just infinite,
And actually, that's
perspectives and.
Yeah, that's when people talk to me and ask me about my journey, because it's been really accelerated. And if I was to say why that would be, apart from the fact of my extreme situation, which I think threw me down the rabbit hole really fast, but it was that word that you said, which is curious, and realizing that to stay curious means you're actually not in judgment. because you're not going from your limited belief, so ignorance and arrogance is actually coming from limited beliefs and not the willingness to hear an alternative to what you already know. Because we know we don't know much, right? The more we know, the more we realize we don't know.
Yep.
And then you become more interested in knowing, but also more aware that you're never going to actually know everything. So to stay curious is the key to growth, I think, because you're aware that you could change your mind when new information comes, and it's a resonance of information as well, of what lands with you, what feels right, what you seem to be already expressing or knowing. But staying curious for me has helped me grow really fast. Like initially I thought, well, everything I thought was a lie. So conceivably everything I thought was true is a lie. So conceivably everything I thought was a lie is true. That was kind of how I started. Flipped everything. Everything was an inversion.
It was, yeah. That's exactly right. Turn everything 180. Yeah.
Turn everything 180. But then I think what's happened over the last couple of years is there are people in the so-called Truth or Freedom movement who are also there for nefarious reasons. So they're tricking. And then for me, I just flipped everything. So I then believed everything that I used to not believe, thinking, well, it must be the truth. And then it's like, ooh, no, that's a bit naive too. And there's this discernment, intuition that comes in with that.
Yeah.
And then as I'm getting more aware and sensitive to frequencies and energy, it's more like an energetic exchange. So there's like this deeper knowingness that comes in when you're meeting with someone at a soul level or coming across information and actually being able to be brave enough to go, no, actually that just doesn't resonate with me. I'm not saying that it's not true, but for me personally it doesn't resonate. And you can say that without judgment.
Yeah.
As someone gave me information recently and I'm like, oh, how do I tell that person that it doesn't resonate with them? I'm like, oh, I just tell them it doesn't resonate.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it wrong. It
doesn't make it wrong.
I'm not telling them not to believe it. It just doesn't feel right for my journey and what I'm here to do. And there's a real relief that comes from being able to speak the truth.
And that's standing in your power.
Yeah.
And standing in your authentic truth.
Yeah.
And coming from a place of, power and authenticity. Yeah.
But remaining non-judgment, because I'm not saying that for that person it's wrong. I'm just saying for me it's wrong.
Right.
And no one can refute that.
No.
Like if someone's going to come in and go, no, I'm telling you that you're wrong and I'm right, you're like, yeah, but who are you to say that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's standing in your power, which has taken me till now to get to like, oh shit, I have to believe what they say. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Yeah. Powerful.
Yeah.
Don't fuck with me.
That's right. That's right.
Am I allowed to say that on reality?
No, you're not.
I got all the way to here
about
F-bombing.
We're going to have to start
I already
again.
said cunt. So it doesn't really matter.
I was going to say, but it's hard. It's so hard to know what the truth is in terms of what's the truth in the media, social media, which dominates so much of people's lives, particularly with AI and how everything can just be replicated. Even Elon Musk just said, we don't know what's truthful, and it can be so manipulated that people just can be programmed, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Oh, we're going to be fine. Well, Jacinda's our chief censor now. So we can trust that whatever she says will continue to be the one source of truth. I'm not in the slightest bit concerned that she's going to cancel live streaming because this is pre-recorded.
Yeah, we need to come back and talk about that one another day.
Yeah, I think so.
You mentioned it before and it blew my mind. I don't know, by the way, if anything I said made sense because I only just heard about it.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I choose though with all these things to live in the excitement of the fact that it's just another opportunity for people to wake up to the truth. Yeah. When you ask about not knowing what's truth in the media, I have a phrase which is, it's all a pantomime.
Yeah, I call it pantomime.
The newsreaders are actors reading from a script. It's a pantomime.
It is. It is completely.
Frightening to think that.
Yeah, but it's frightening to think that because recent events have shown how much of the population can be mass psyoped and just fall for things if it gets said enough and all the psychological, all the tricks. That's what's scary. That you can't make a discernment and you can't just question it and kind of come at it from a create some space around it and go, and just question it and just get a little bit curious that maybe this is not correct.
I think what I've come to with no scientific evidence, just my own feels, is that there's a direct correlation between how much mainstream media you've consumed and how aware you are of the actual truth. Like the people who are digging their heels in the most are the people who are still watching the 6 o'clock news and buying the Herald.
Right.
The people, there are a lot of people out there that now don't watch the news because they know it's lies. And so they are more open to hearing an alternative viewpoint. But the people who still tune into just the news and just the mainstream, I don't really know what's going to happen to them because, the truth is becoming pretty horrifying if you haven't figured it out yet. And I do think there's a direct correlation between it. Because going back to like 2020 for me and like a lot of people who hadn't already, who switched off the news at that point, like I watched a couple of whatever those updates were because we had to try and figure out every day how the rules changed at work and things like that. But as a marketing and comms person, even though I didn't know the full story, it didn't sit right with me. The repetitive nature of the sounds of the ads and the droning of the voice and the ka-chung, 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 the radio ads, the consistency in all of the print ads, the branding of the yellow and black. Like as a marketing person, I was like, that's the slickest campaign I've ever seen go out. Like the massive amount of money, the prep that had gone into it, the speed at which it came out.
It was a military grade psyop.
It was totally it was a total brainwashing exercise.
And the marketing campaign that was run that was from an ad agency from within the inside of the City of London.
Oh, was it? That we did here.
It came from one of the world's just most advanced marketing agencies.
And don't get me wrong, we were getting brainwashed all the time through media and commercial.
So but this was the big hit, right? This was the one that we couldn't ignore.
When it's been rolled out worldwide with a similar, intent. And with such vigor and such force and with such repetitiveness and it's I don't blame that people,
I can see how that people are literally brainwashed.
That they would fall for that and that it's just
I think for me, I'd switched it all off most of the time. And then I went into somewhere like a supermarket. And I remember going into a warehouse and hearing, and they'd have like one song and then they'd have an ad. One song and then they'd have an ad. And an ad being a COVID, you must wear a mask. And I went into a supermarket and it was like, only take what you need. Maximum 2 per customer. And I'm like, oh my God, like people aren't even noticing that the food shortage, And so what I noticed was like this frog in a pot syndrome where if you're listening to it all the time, if the radio is always on, if the TV is always on, if you're always looking at the same,
it's subliminal,
you don't notice it. But when you aren't in that space and then you see it and you're like, I haven't heard this for 6 months, but oh my God, like they're using a droning, but it's a low vibrational frequency so that the sound vibration of it is depressing. It's fear-mongering. I just got this sense of like marching to the gas chambers. Like it was depressing. It's that kind of sense of hopelessness and helplessness.
Or NLP. It was all there. All the subliminal, all the different facets of programming.
I wonder if you were to hear it now, if it
were executed,
you would notice it.
You would feel
bad.
it, and you'd feel that program start to kick off on you, and you go, "Oh yeah, it had a grip on me."
Well, that's what I noticed when I walked into some shops, and I hadn't been out there for ages. I've been like just tucked in my little world.
Yeah.
And then I heard it, and it just hit me so hard. And I was like, "Wow! If you are hearing it all the time, no wonder they're literally hypnotized."
Yeah. Sorry,
they did a really good job.
Yeah,
they did it.
Fantastic.
They did a great job.
Yeah, I know. But overwhelmingly, it was to create fear. I think the fear response is obviously very much
and reliance on them for all their news and information and direction and rules.
Exactly.
And I just think, I think back to because as a border person and not being able to come across the border. unless I had my paperwork or my jabs. I was like, well, this is how flimsy our life has become. You know, like in Germany, they had to build a wall, but nowadays in New Zealand, all we had was some traffic cones and some people in costumes, right? And we just all went, oh, we better stay home. I'm like, how weak is that of us? We had no fight in us.
It's true.
It's interesting what state humanity was at, where they just laid down and took it.
I saw it as a good litmus test to see, you know,
where are the rebels,
where humanity is at,
and how easily we can be controlled by fear.
Yeah, controlled, manipulated, and can we? The word sovereign being, you know, can we? You know, that our sovereignty, and can we come from our own power, and can we tap back into our truth and our heart and soul essence, and not, you know, and not come from a place of fear.
And have you got the answer?
Yes.
Yeah,
of course.
No, that was the answer within that statement.
Yeah.
You just nailed it, Rob.
Absolutely,
that was the answer. Just don't come from a place of fear.
Yeah.
Just be within your being and know what the right thing is to do.
Yeah.
And just know it and be at peace with it.
And that was a big part for me of my journey, was literally like, as someone said to me very early on, there's two base emotions, excitement and fear. A lot of people say love and fear, but excitement and fear was a really good framework for me, because love has its own connotations and limitations, and, you know,
so many different interpretations to love.
It's kind of been, but excitement and fear is simple, right?
Yeah.
So what I would notice every time I was thinking a thought or making a decision was, am I doing that for fear? Because what would the excitement version be? And usually it was something like metaphorically jumping off the cliff and hoping that my wings would catch me. And then finding like, hey, I'm okay. I didn't die. I didn't die of hypothermia and starvation. I'm all good. The universe will catch me, or I will catch my wings. And that whole fear versus excitement is like, if I can leave you with one thing, if we're wrapping up, you know, if you make a decision and you notice the fear, consider the excitement version of it.
Yes. Because fear can have a strong grip.
Well, fear is what they're using, right? The fear is their tool. And so we're actually feeding them, even if we're outside of the matrix. But if we're afraid to speak the truth, you know, if we're afraid to stand up for what we believe in, and if we'd rather stay quiet, and if we want to stay beneath the parapet because of fear of what the media might say, or fear of what our friends might say, that's fear. Like, face the fear. If you think that telling your story will help somebody, or will save a life, or will answer a question, don't be in fear.
That's beautiful. Where can people find you, Penny? Just to wrap up again.
Okay, so voicemedia.nz is a new independent news platform, and there's multiple channels on it, and I've got a channel called Pendulum, so if you would like to go and sign up on there, that would be one place to find me.
Brilliant.
All
right. That
Thank
was
you
awesome.
very much.
That was an awesome chat, Penny. Yeah.
I love you guys. You guys are amazing.
That was so cool.
Yeah, we know. See you next time.